let's go down the line for the sake of context before we get into what you're each doing, and just introduce yourselves and your company.
I'm Lee McMillan. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Avo, which is an online legal marketplace based in Seattle.
I'm Joel Toldano. I run strategic partnerships for Curbside, which is based here in the Bay Area.
My name's Brendan Benzing. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called My Neighbor. It is a platform for neighbors to borrow and lend goods and services with their other neighbors. As Michael alluded to, it's a peer-to-peer model, which is really kind of a subsegment of the on-demand economy.
Mm-hmm. And we'll dig into all of those individually. So Chris and I already got some of the high-level stuff out of the way of the meta trends that are driving all of this. For each of you, and you're each representing different verticals, what are the things that we talked about, or feel free to add some of your own kind of attributes of this OLDS, ODLS movement that are applying to your vertical and the reasons you're building your business or different features of your existing business on some of these principles? Lee, why don't you go first?
Well, legal is an interesting category in that you want to talk about friction and lack of transparency. I don't think there's a vertical that has more. To the extent where there's an untapped market in legal, because I kind of liken it to Pepe Le Pew. Consumers don't always want to get legal services. And so for us, removing friction has to do with also addressing fear and humanity. So services are people, and in the legal space there is a predisposition, and I was discussing with someone this morning around attorneys. And so one of the things that we need to do is really bring humanity to the service that we provide. It's not a car, it's a person that's going to help you deal with something that's oftentimes very serious. And so part of the thing that we have to do is to think about that. And the one last thing, and I'll kind of touch on before I pass it, is on the other side, if you talk about supply, untapped supply, attorneys have time that they cannot monetize. And so just like there are repair trucks driving around that aren't on a call, attorneys have time that they can monetize. And so we think about it the same way on the supply side as the others do.
That's interesting. It's billable hours, and like any other business, sometimes you have perishable inventory, and it's monetizing time. So that's interesting. We can get back to that. Joel, tell us about Curbside.
Sure. So Curbside is a mobile product search app. We launched about 5 months ago here in the Bay Area. And what we do, we enable you to search for and find products that are for sale and in stock at local brick and mortar retailers in your area. Because fundamentally, one of the reasons that when you talk about the on-demand economy, the fundamental difference of mobile product search is if you're on your mobile phone shopping, inherently we assume that you're not at home and you want to get something in your local area, which is very different than the e-commerce model of I'm at my desktop leaning back, I want to buy it and have it shipped to me. So in the mobile economy, it makes sense to find out where these products are near me right now and where can I go and get them right now. So being able to order ahead, and then we have an entire SaaS platform that we license to retailers. We're at 11 targets in the Bay Area. We're launching with another major retailer next week in the Bay Area. And with that platform, you can imagine, since Uber's in the title of your thing, it's an Uber-style view. Then they have a geofence of the entire store. Once you get close to the store, the associates can actually see you arriving, meet you right out front with your goods. It's a 15-second pickup instead of you having to go into the store, pick up the items inside, or wait in line to do anything else. Here you drive right up. It's 15 seconds. Literally, people look at you and say, "Is that all it is? You just saved me an hour in my day."
Yeah, saving time is one of those tangible benefits we always seem to forget. And I think the timing for Curbside is interesting too, because you have same-day delivery that companies like eBay have kind of launched and then pulled back on. And then you also have a lot of retailers that have done their homegrown buy online, pick up in store things. And in a lot of cases, they've kind of failed to build something that is as slick as what a kind of tech-first company like Curbside could do.
Retailers will be the first to tell you that on the mobile side, they're a little behind. Many of them in a private moment will look at you and say, "We just discovered the desktop."
So, yeah, right. So Brendan.
Well, you asked about kind of what it takes in the on-demand economy, why now? And there's a couple of kind of mega trends that I see. One is obviously people are leading a mobile lifestyle, but what comes with that's extremely powerful now to drive liquidity is identity management, right? Identity management really didn't exist in the early days of the internet, where it was very difficult to get liquidity. But identity management, I think, has really contributed to this kind of trust, which is critical. The other thing about My Neighbor that we do that's unique is we have a shared interest group. Obviously, naturally and culturally built in, because we're really trying to empower neighbors to enable other neighbors to be able to save money, raise money for charities, or earn money if they're in the 1099, or what I call kind of the micro entrepreneurial world. So I think what we're seeing is really yield optimization that technology is bringing to old world businesses that have existed, or practices that have occurred for a long time. Very much like Uber did in the early days, where they had a brick business, which was town cars, but it was all the time in between that was the mortar. And that value, technology is finally extracting on a local level due to mobility.
Now, it's interesting you mentioned yield management, and that leads into my next question, which I think that the kind of phase 2 of ODLS will be using all the data from these kind of transparent marketplaces to optimize pricing and start to do variable pricing, demand-based pricing, sort of like what airlines do. And Uber already does this with surge pricing. And Lee, you talked about managing time and billable hours, and a lot of this was the promise of, you guys remember the deals craze of 2010, a lot of it was all about discounting perishable inventory. It seems like, this movement could finally be the promise that deals movement made. How does that apply to what each of you guys are doing? Do you envision variable pricing to what you're doing, or in maybe other verticals, or anywhere in this discussion? Brendan, why don't you go first?
Yeah,
you finish off.
I think price is very delicate in some businesses, as Chris talked about in his business.
Yeah.
Price sensitivity is critical, right? And the likelihood to use his services, because you kind of know what you're getting into, right? They're not going to take advantage of you.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be different in each market. Like, I find in our business, being local and the proximity and price, we have to compete on those elements. We have to be easier than going to the retail rental place that's 10 miles away, right? And so in some instances, you may pay for the convenience of being able to get it from a neighbor and pay a little bit more. But my sense is price and convenience have to win at the forefront before all these other kind of secondary benefits come to fruition.
Lee, what about legal fees? Are those as inelastic to be kind of tinkered with in these ways where demand is variable?
Well, pricing's a little bit different for us in that we're tackling the lack of transparency in pricing, and frankly, in some cases, sanity.
Yeah.
Right now, a consumer can't tell, this attorney's $200 an hour, this one's $500 an hour. What's the difference between the two?
Yeah.
This one bills on 6-minute increments. Yikes. So we're a little bit less about demand-type pricing and making pricing understandable. And so we may be going back to the 2000s, where we're actually doing a lot more things around fixed pricing. So you get a certain service for a fixed price, and then there are, of course, going to be things that are unique. Every legal situation is unique, and then that can be billed at a different rate. But there are a lot of legal situations at a base level that are very similar. And so that's our approach is slightly different. Our problem is slightly different.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Joel, pricing with your retail partners is probably somewhat fixed. Is there any trends that you're seeing in retail that could lend itself to this, anything demand-based? I mean, I guess that's kind of the concept behind, Black Friday and Super Tuesday and every other day of the week that's been renamed for retail. Any kind of pricing discussion around that, or is it somewhat fixed?
Well, I think if you up-level it to the thesis that if you had the opportunity as a consumer to then see this product I want to buy, whether it's something I need right away or I can wait 2 days for, here's the price online. You can go to Amazon today and find that right away. But then if I knew I could also compare it directly with, here's the prices of all the stores in my local area.
Sure.
Whether they have it right now and whether I can go and get it. And you can make the choice as to which one you want to get. Today, you have to go to each of the retailers' apps or websites. It's a pain in the butt. People are just not going to do that. They don't shop for travel that way by going to Hilton's site and Sheraton's site and everything else like that. They go to an aggregator. So if you can see that all in one place and you make the decision, then the prices are bound to.
Oh, interesting. So the transparency you're creating is naturally going to drive prices down in some ways.
Or may enable the store managers who have an overstock of things that didn't sell on Black Friday now to put those things on sale, flag them right there. And it's a yield management opportunity because they don't have to run an ad in the newspaper and drop their prices 40%. Here they can push it out to people, for 20%, and then try 30%, so they can maximize their yields better in that way.
And Chris, the sense of urgency that is kind of core to this demand pricing is probably not, it's evident for sure what you're doing.
Yeah, certainly in roadside, but we also believe in a range of number of other verticals that emergency service, is important to the consumer. If we can connect them with that servicer who has perishable unscheduled inventory nearby, that it actually can lower pricing for that consumer. So I don't think we're going to pursue an Uber model and do extreme surge pricing if there's like a tornado or something like that.
Sure.
We're going to try and stay on the more consumer-friendly side.
You can
So-
stick nails on the road?
No.
Brendan, I want to
There's
give
220 million flat tires a year. There's plenty in America.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Brendan, I want to give you a chance to weigh on in what Chris and I alluded to with the generational stuff, because last time I talked to you, you had some interesting historical perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about the millennials, right? And the question is, what are the conditions that kind of created the environment where, they're a little bit more hesitant? And I kind of talked about the hangover of the Great Recession. This is a group of people that maybe graduated with more college debt than they've ever had, or their parents or grandparents lived through the housing crisis. So they're apprehensive about ownership, and they also think about access as a more experiential kind of way of consumption. And so I think there's some similarities to millennials who are definitely leading in the shared economy, but there's some similarities to them to even baby boomers who are towards the end of life. They're no longer gathering things. They're trying to unload and declutter their lives. So we see kind of a lot of different similarities. The people kind of my age and a lot of the people here, we grew up in kind of the 80s and 70s where it was, the American hustle and Wolf of Wall Street, which was, try and get as many things as you possibly can. But this post-consumerist mode is really becoming the norm. And we're seeing that, more stuff isn't going to make you happy, but access to things is all you really need. So I really believe in that trend and how it can be disruptive to commerce.
Well, I read a statistic recently that the average power drill is used 13 minutes in the overall span of its life. and the traditional way of thinking of, I'm building a shelf, so I'm in the market for a power drill. You're not in the market for a power drill, you're in the market for holes.
That's right.
And obtaining those holes could be something that is a rental, it could be a quick service, but the traditional way of thinking is, I'm going to buy that $80 drill.
That's right, and I think that's where this goods and services model starts to come to fruition, because some people enjoy drilling that hole, right? And so they want to drill the hole and feel good about doing the do-it-yourself project around the house. But you're exactly right. I think if we start to think about this concept of yield management, you start to think about the number of drills and power washers and skis and all these other types of things that are taking up attics and basements and cellars. And some of those things you don't want to get rid of. There's lots of solutions for that, right? Craigslist, Yurtle, eBay, etc.
Self-storage.
But there's really not anything for, hey, I've got these items that I want to keep, but I don't use them as frequently as I want. So we feel like, hey, if there's a way I can either raise money for myself or for my favorite community association or charity without spending a dime, I love the idea. So it resonates with people.
Generational thoughts from any of you guys? How it applies to what you're doing? Or we can move on to the next question.
Certainly, generationally, mobile shopping is very, very high for retailers amongst millennials, not amongst older folks, but what they're seeing is this huge wave of people coming in and shopping via mobile. The stats that just came out from Black Friday, I think the one I saw was that it's the first time 1/3 of all Black Friday shopping was done via mobile.
Interesting.
Now, I'm not sure whether the stats were that it was consummated on mobile,
Yeah,
or if it
that's
was,
what I was gonna ask.
if it was researched and then someone went to a store or took advantage of a coupon from mobile. But those are pretty high numbers.
Interesting. So, Joel, you mentioned some of the value proposition for the user in saving time and really just having a more seamless experience. And of course, that resonates around the holidays where you're taking parking out of the equation. You're taking lots out of the equation. Lots of bad things out of the equation. What about on the retailer end? What's your value proposition for your constituent is probably the end user, of course, and the retailer, because that's your partner. What are you doing for them or communicating to them? Are you increasing basket sizes? Are you helping them fight showrooming? Things like that they're really, their ears perk up when they hear about those types of things.
Sure. We launched with one Target in Sunnyvale 5 months ago, and Target's expanded this now to 11 Targets in the Bay Area in the span of the last 5 months. It's been one of the fastest expansions of a pilot in their history. And the reason is because we're keeping almost the exact same basket size as they have today for their buy online, pick up in store orders, but we're increasing the frequency of those orders. So now people are shopping a fair bit more each time, each month, because they do a typical Target run to buy their toothpaste, toilet paper, and so on, a couple times a month. Here now we're increasing that frequency, keeping basket size almost the same, and as we're surveying customers, and as Target and other retailers are as well, it's because people now, because of the convenience of saying, I don't have to get the kids out of the car. I don't have to search for parking. I don't have to do this. So I'm willing to drive 5 miles further down the road and pass by CVS or Walgreens or anywhere else where I could get the diapers and the other things I needed because I know I've got 10 other places to be in my day. Well, now I can just drive up, swing over, pick it up, and I'm on my way. And you don't have to idle and text when you get there or call when you get there. Someone meets you right out front. It's that magical kind of experience.
And you told me before the session you're also seeing a use case develop where people are not even driving there. They're either taking the bus or even Uber in some situations.
Yeah, we've launched the 2 city targets, and people will drive up in an Uber, step out, grab it, and get right back in the car and keep going.
Nice. That's the double whammy of ODLS, curbside and Uber. So we're going to take some audience questions, either by Twitter. The hashtag is, what is the hashtag? I believe it's hashtag ILMQ. We'll get those answered through an audience curator, or if you can raise your hand. So I'll just signal you we're going to take questions. I'll keep going, but please raise your hand. Actually, there's one here. Do we have a mic yet? We'll get that over to you, Stephen. And in the meantime, and then another question here after Stephen. Lee, why don't you tell us about Abo Advisor? I mean, you mentioned some of the principles behind it, but just that, brand that for us.
Yeah, you're probably all wondering why I'm sitting up here, like what could possibly be legal on demand. So we recently launched an application. It's a mobile app. It's also available on desktop where you can go in and give us your geography, just a little bit about the category that your legal issue is in, pay us $39, and we will connect you within 15 minutes to a experienced, qualified local attorney over the phone. You do the legal guidance session or advice session over the phone, and then you can determine with the attorney if you want to meet with them in person afterwards or extend the call. And it does a couple of things. So many people have, I'll call it bite-sized, not to make it pedestrian or make light of it, but bite-sized legal issues, particularly if you think about categories like small business. How do I form an LLC? Should I do that, or an S-Corp? Immigration, there's a lot of forms and processes and things. Even after a divorce, there's a lot of questions, continuing issues around child custody. And so previously you had to go back, go through, go research, pay a retainer, go meet with the attorney. This enables you to get the information that you need really quickly. And then it enables the attorney to, as I alluded to before, monetize time that they couldn't previously. So attorneys will indicate that they're available via text message to us. And so then when the consumer comes in, we can reach out to a whole pool of attorneys, not just one, like back in the lead gen days, and the consumer can choose the attorney or have them let us choose it for them.
That's interesting. It sounds like or similar to the democratization that companies like LegalZoom and Dunn have for documentation, taking that another level to the actual high-touch legal situation.
Yeah, we firmly believe that legal services should be as routine as getting your car serviced, going to a doctor, but that it's still important to have attorney involved in many, many, many of the issues. And so unlike a LegalZoom where you don't see any attorney and kind of unclear in which case the attorney's engaging, you know who the attorney is that you're dealing with.
Yeah, and legal isn't a place where you want to see do-it-yourself projects like you see in Brendan's business.
Yes.
Okay, so
you can put them together with urgently.
Exactly.
Two questions. I'm not sure who's first.
I see some parallels here, so we need to talk about that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Two questions. I'm not sure who's first, but someone fire away. Go ahead, you sir, standing at the mic. Go
Okay.
ahead.
My question is for the gentleman from Curbside. It seems like when I go to the grocery store, the milk is always in the farthest corner of the store because they want you to go into the store, buy the milk, and buy a bunch of other stuff on the way out. Do you get pushback from retailers on the idea of, well, 15 seconds, I drive up and we're going to bring it out to you, whatever, so that you don't have to go to the store and buy a bunch of other things while you're there?
They would have had pushback had they not launched their own e-commerce services over the last 5 to 7 years, to compete with Amazon. They realized that if they're not meeting the consumer's need for what they want to get when they want to get it, they're going to lose that sale, right? So what they find is we're seeing a small but growing trend. They allocate a series of parking spots right out front for us so that someone, if they want to buy all their basics, for example, through Curbside, will load into their car. They'll pull into that parking spot and still go in to get the additional milk, bananas, clothing for the kids, see what's on Manager Special. So you get that higher attach rate. Because if you take something like a same-day delivery service, you're never giving someone the opportunity to go even go into the store. Here, we give them the opportunity, but not the obligation to go into the store if they'd like.
As a follow-up, then, how often do you encounter retailers who just don't get it yet? That's still cling to that old model of I want to bring them into the store and run them through a maze so they buy a bunch of stuff that they wouldn't have bought otherwise.
I mean, I won't lie to you. Some retailers are dinosaurs. There's no doubt. But most of them have really reformed their services a lot, and they're really focused on multi-channel fulfillment. They know that you may come into the store, wind up buying it online. They know you may buy it on your mobile device and still want to come into the store and pick it up. You know, a stat that Best Buy talks about is 50% of all their e-commerce purchases are picked up in a store. They're not shipped to the consumer, and that's because people want the immediacy of getting it now. That's true.
Thank you.
Stephen, do you have a question?
Yeah,
Go for it.
for curbside as well. I was talking to a pretty major retailer.
If you wait for the mic, we'll make sure we'll get your voice on the video feed and the recording. Sorry to make you get up.
So I was talking to a pretty big retailer the other day, and he said one of the big problems is that most of the distribution for e-commerce is happening from actual stores itself, but there's a huge problem with the staffing model because you have salespeople who are paid on commission that are actually doing fulfillment. And so, you know, part of your, you know, what Curbside does is it takes that, you know, you're taking that commission for a sale, and then a Target might be having a salesperson actually do the fulfillment. So could you talk a little bit about how Target and some of these retailers are managing the change in the staffing models and the way that they're paying and compensating their employees?
Sure. Most of the retailers we talk to are not on a commission model for that. You know, something like Fry's might be, but taking it back to labor, you know, they really like the labor optimization approach, for example, that we offer them. If they use our console, then I can take the same person who is normally in the store. They might be sitting idle for 15 minutes while they're waiting for a guest to come up. In this case, now they can get an alert that, you know, for example, Lee is driving up right now. They can have her order waiting in hand, meet her right out front, you know, run outside for 15 seconds and run back inside. You've taken the same employee, made them more efficient in their jobs at that point.
So are you working with the e-commerce division or the kind of in-store sales division?
We actually span both because much of their mobile piece comes out of the e-commerce side, so how you drive sales for online, but then in-store pickup is fulfilled via the store operations. They've had to surmount that themselves over the past several years.
Joel, what are the product categories that you think are most conducive to your model? You know, with some of your partners like Target now, you could probably start to guess, but I mean, is it consumer electronics, groceries, or all of the above? Are there any that are, with the frequency of the purchase, the dollar amounts, any variables like that kind of make some better than others?
Yeah. Mobile shopping, since we're mobile only, mobile doesn't lend itself to really high consideration. You're not going to buy a fridge, you know, on your mobile device.
You're not going to buy an engagement, right?
You're not going to buy it through us, right? But the reality is people tend to buy the same stuff week after week after week after week.
Yeah.
You need the same size of diapers, you need the same type of toothpaste, your dog needs the exact same type of food. Having that and having it as a replicable, let me mirror that order in the quick, convenient one touch, and then not have to schedule it or wait for a pickup or have a delivery window. Instead, you can just drive up to the store and pick it up at your own convenience and not have to alert them that you're coming. That's what leads to the benefit of our service.
Sure. What about you, Brendan, in terms of the types of, I mean, do you see any trending of the types of different goods that are being rented and shared? Or,
yeah, I mean, there's definitely, we anticipate, you know, in the goods categories, things that have relatively high cost, low frequency.
Okay.
And so, you know, that could be sporting goods equipment, that could be
table saw,
home and garden, table saws, you know, those types of things. And when you look at the retail market for rentals, do-it-yourself tools, party equipment and supplies, it's forecast to be $15 billion by 2017. So it's a pretty big category. Now, not all of that's going to go to peer-to-peer, et cetera, but those categories, I think, are definitely possible. And then there's a lot of latent categories like kayak, skis, and just other outdoor things that aren't even tracked in that number. So my sense, that's the case in the goods. We're initially on the services side. You may or may not live next to a tow truck driver or a lawyer, but my sense is there's these micro entrepreneurs, whether it's babysitters, dog walkers, somebody to wash your car, these are what we're kind of calling micro entrepreneurs who are looking, if you're looking for a swim instructor for your kid or somebody like that, these people are in the neighborhoods, and they tend to be marketing and promoting today with pamphlets in the coffee shop. And so we think we can give them another vehicle to reach out and support their neighbors. Nice.
Speaking of vehicles, Chris, what are the types of things that you're seeing most? I mean, I imagine probably a lot of flat tires and dead batteries, and that's also a lead into the question of, it seems like there's a lot of synergies with other parts of the value chain for referral-based revenues or whatever deals you strike for things like repair or other kind of high-margin types of adjoining or adjacent services.
Yeah, sure. So, there's not a lot of variance in terms of what we see, right? I've got a flat tire, I need a jump start, or I need the car towed, right? It's pretty straightforward. But what we do see is customers saying, well, where can I take it, right? So, we're fortunate in DC, we have relationships with certain repair shops, so we begin to direct them that way, and we see the promise of some referral revenue and some partnerships that way. We also see customers saying, well, my car's going this way, I need to go to work, right? How do I get transport, right? So there's some obvious partnerships there that we can do, and we're beginning to have those discussions. So yeah, there's a lot we can do in terms of tying in other automotive services into our native app. But the most important thing for us is consumer raises their hand and says, I need help. How do we connect them with the closest provider to get them that help and get them back on the road as quickly as possible and feel good about it? So.
Lee, you mentioned some of the areas where you guys are shining, some of those lower barrier legal services. Anything to add while these guys all weighed in on the types of different products that their services are shining in?
Well, kind of a slightly different take on it is, much as these guys do, looking at the experience 360 degrees, so all the way through. So not just handing off the consumer to the attorney, but also making sure that the entire experience and managing that process, because the consumer is paying us, and we're passing it through to the attorney. And so I was just thinking about kind of ways that we extend our platform is we found that a number of attorneys and a lot of the folks who work with our solo and small firms don't have the ability to really handle incoming contacts from consumers. They don't do it super well. Yeah. And we're talking about millennials require things now and require services now. The legal industry is behind when it comes to that. And so we actually developed a software platform to help them respond faster to the consumers, and that was as much about them as it was about us making sure that the experience that we deliver to the consumer was solid.
Sure. So we have about 2 minutes left. Is there one more audience question, and then we'll do kind of one final words type of thing? Any other questions out there? Okay, so what I want to hear from each of you is, and you can interpret this in many ways, kind of what you see as the next step in all of this, either for your own business or other different verticals that kind of have the attributes where this on-demand local services type of model fits in and where it hasn't happened yet. And I'll give one example. Car washes is an interesting one because the largest cost structure of car washes is actually real estate, because you want to be on the corner on a busy intersection. And we've seen some attempts at services which have someone come to your home, use your water, your driveway, and enable, by doing that, reduce a great deal of that cost structure that's in some ways passed on to the consumer and just kind of utilized in other ways. So the question is, any other areas or verticals that you see where this could apply, or kind of the things that you're seeing in your own business in the next steps, as far as you can do that without disclosing too much about your roadmap, if that isn't something you want to do. So actually anyone can jump in if they have a thought, and we'll get around to everyone.
Well, I'll just give you kind of my thought of how I really look at how the on-demand economy is going to disrupt traditional retail and consumption. And the question is, what does that impact really look like? And certainly, curbside is enabling some of those kind of traditional retailers to respond. But I think, if I were working at Marriott or Hilton right now, wondering, how do I respond to Airbnb? Yeah. I think that's going to be the next shift. So, the people who built Car2Go, Mercedes-Benz, recognized, hey, in 30 years, what's car ownership going to look like? And so I think, retailers or anybody, whether you're a manufacturer or a retailer, you have to start thinking differently about what is your role and your responsibility in the life cycle of the product or service that you have, and what's its longevity, and how do you interact with the customer through that entire life cycle. And I think if they start thinking about businesses that way, they can embrace the on-demand economy as opposed to look at maybe today as a threat.
Do you think in the kind of incumbents in this situation, or do you have faith that a lot of them will be able to kind of be as nimble as some of these smaller players?
No, I mean, I think that's, that's the mode of disruption, but I do believe that, some companies will understand yield optimization. People are building very large centralized distribution now, where you could have decentralized distribution in a pure peer-to-peer economy, where people are sharing space and, I want to say like an Avon model or a local rep model, but you could imagine a model where retail is available in the local neighborhood.
I mean,
Go ahead, Chris.
for us, it's around, connecting anybody with an urgent need with the nearest available party who's available and capable of helping them. So you can sort of imagine the
Ice cream trucks.
Ice cream trucks. Could be ice cream trucks. Could be your dishwasher going crazy. There's a range of verticals, and I think what's interesting, particularly with millennials, but the overall market is I have an emergency need, something as bad is happening, and I need it solved right now. But then there's this other category that says, you know what, I would get it done now if I knew that I could easily see that it could be done now, right? So something that was going to be a scheduled service might get pulled further, closer, if you can easily see available capability and supply near you, right? So I think 5 years from now, this is how every service is going to be searched, found in America, and so that's what we're looking to do.
So lowering those barriers could, in effect, increase the volume or frequency of the service itself.
Yeah, or pull it forward, right? Yeah. One of the things that we saw going back a little bit to Repair.com is we actually we stimulated demand for repair in the sense of they had an immediate need, and then they said, well, I like this so much, I'm going to get this thing over here repaired that I wasn't planning on getting repaired. So, how can we pull things a little bit more now enabled versus scheduled enabled? So,
final words from either of you guys?
I'll just briefly touch on that. We see a world where, like I said, legal services are just like getting your car tuned up. And so the idea of having a legal team on your phone. Legal is low frequency. And when you need it, it tends to not be the same type of law. So I need a will, or I unfortunately got a DUI, different things like that. And so the idea that you could get all of those services and have a legal team that's affordable and you can understand the costs is kind of our roadmap, if you will.
I like that a lot, personally speaking. Go ahead, Joel.
Taking a slightly different perspective, I think on your phone, there's a lot of data that shows that people don't tend to flip past the first screen of their phone to the apps on the second screen. So there are a lot of apps doing a lot of different things, and the received wisdom in the Valley tends to be that an app should do just one thing and do it extremely well. But people tend to use certain apps that they go back to habitually. So I think you'll see a lot of that rolled up into just a handful of apps that then can link out to all these other services that may be used through there, how they get found and things of that nature.
Yeah, that's similar to what Chris and I were talking about earlier with the interconnectedness of apps and deep linking and that kind of thing, because that siloed architecture has made it hard to get in front of users for repetitive usage. So that's all the time we have, unfortunately. So please join me in thanking this panel.